Okay, so I'm going to talk specifically about rapid feedback MERL, or Monitoring, Evaluation, Research, and Learning, which is a new initiative that's being piloted within USAID. The organization I work for is called Results for Development Institute, and so our mission is to support local change agents in countries around the world to create self-sustaining systems that result in healthy and educated people. And a lot of the ways in which we do that is around empowering local change agents. And so that's government officials, civil society leaders, social innovators, and these are the people that we believe can bring about real change and should. We listen to what they need, build on their expertise to work alongside them, and then generate knowledge and resources that can be applied to key problem areas. We do that in a number of different ways. The practice that I lead, which is our evaluation and adaptive learning practice, fits squarely within that goal. And so we're working basically with local change agents to design, experiment with, and evaluate ways to accelerate their impact. Our practice was launched about 2.5 years ago with a flagship initiative through USAID, and this is the MERL initiative. And essentially, USAID at that point recognized that they needed and wanted to think about monitoring and evaluation differently within the mission activities. So they put out an open call and they said, hey, if your organization is doing something different and innovative than M&E, we want to hear about it. They held a co-creation workshop, invited about 30 organizations to that, and out of that, 4 different ideas or concepts were funded to be piloted and tested within USAID to see if it would actually work within the agency. And so our concept was one of the ones that was funded, and through that we formed a consortium that includes us as the lead, and then some other kind of big evaluation names in the space, Associates, Mathematica, and the Notre Dame Initiative for Global Development. At this point, we've been around for a little over 2 years, and we're currently implementing this concept in 6 pilots within USAID, and then probably over the next 6 months, we'll have about 3 or 4 more launched. Okay, so what does this actually mean? This resonates a lot, I think, with the earlier presentation than a lot of what we heard yesterday as well, but one of the things that we recognize is that developing a program that delivers results is really hard. But we believe that we can do better with quote-unquote smarter piloting, iteration, and adaptation, especially during the design process. And I want to be clear that that is especially applicable when you're developing an entirely new program. But we at R4D have also worked with programs that have been implementing for 50+ years, but they just felt like there were some concepts that they weren't quite getting right, or they were ready to launch new activities and felt like there could be opportunities for support. And the whole notion here is that this ensures that the significant time and effort and technical inputs to rigorously evaluate is more likely spent on programs without design flaws that could have been surfaced more easily and cheaply earlier on. At least that's the hope. A couple of things that are signature about our approach is that we want it to be very participatory. And so this is very much about putting the implementing partners in the driver's seat. They're the ones that are defining the learning questions that we're focused on. We work really closely with them around capacity building for M&E. And then they're also the ones that ultimately, after we present some of the findings from the analysis, make the ultimate call on what they want to change within the program design at the end of the day. The other piece that I think makes this a little bit different from traditional external evaluation approaches is we're pretty actively involved in intervention design. We have a seat at the table, and so we're very close learning partners with implementing partners and thinking about the different ideas that come to fold. And then, I know I've harped on this a lot, but we really like theories of change, and we use that as a roadmap for engagement. I really loved yesterday in your presentation when you said that you need the right mix of weak links and crucial links, and that's exactly the nexus that we try to find within the TOC to focus where we provide our support. And it's like where within the connection between the activities and the outcomes are you the most uncertain, or does it seem like there needs to be more evidence that's generated? And then that can pull together a list of millions of possibilities. So you need to prioritize based on those links that are the most important to get right to ever get to your ultimate intended outcomes. Okay, I am a little bit nervous to share this slide, but also excited based on yesterday's discussion. I think there are lots of ways that we can pick this apart, but I'm just going to put this idea out here and then we can have a discussion later. So one of the things that we've seen over our experience is that the more uncertain you are about the design of any program component, the less rigor you may need. And I use rigor to mean quantitative statistical rigor. And the idea is that failure is more likely than success at that stage. So you can test quickly on a small scale, fail at times, and then hopefully in doing so, eliminate some clearly flawed design choices that otherwise would emerge much later on in the implementation process. The more confident you are, or the less uncertainty there is, evidence-wise, the more you can and should invest in more rigorous methods. And so you can see here, where there is more uncertainty, then we say, applied methods like lean testing, formative research may be more applicable. In some of our other work at Results for Development, we do a lot of peer-to-peer learning collaboratives where it's focused around best practice sharing and tacit knowledge. And so I think at that point, that's extremely applicable. Once you get to the point where you feel much more confident, then you can move into structured experimentation and then an impact evaluation. Oh no, this has, okay, hold on, I'll click. Okay, so here's what our process looks like. We have 3 different phases. I apologize because this should not be shown as linear, but I cheated and used smart art. And so the 3 different phases are screening, development, and implementation. The idea is that each of these is a feedback loop in and of itself that's kind of moving in a progressive or forward-moving direction. But within each of these, there are many, many feedback loops that also happen. The screening phase is where we are basically trying to identify which programs are the right fit, who should we be engaging with within USAID around some of these testing opportunities. And we have a whole list of criteria that we use and actually a quiz that we send out to the implementers to suss some of that out. Then what we like to do is to dive into the theory of change and uncover the underlying assumptions that are in need of further testing. Then in the development phase, this is where we start to think about the intervention design. And so here, a lot of the activities are around formative research, and then lean testing, especially where we have a lot of questions about just doing the pre-piloting process in particular. Okay, and then the last phase is implementation, and that's where we feel like, all right, we feel pretty confident about these 2 or 3 different intervention options, and we actually want to compare them against one another. And so the idea is that we move into experimental design, but instead of comparing option A to a control, it's option A, B, and C against one another. And those are all 3 options that we're excited about, but we just don't know which one to make a big bet on. The other thing that's important to note throughout all of this is we're working very closely with the implementer, again, to have them drive all of the questions, decisions, and then we're building in periodic processes throughout to figure out when do we have enough information to make a decision, and then we call those learning checks, and we sit down with them, present the information, and then figure out jointly how to action plan based on that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about an example of how this played out in Cambodia with our very first USAID pilot, which actually just wrapped up last month. I was shocked to learn this. I did not work in the child protection space previously, but what we saw was that of the children that live in orphanages or residential care institutions in Cambodia, only 23% of them are actual orphans. The rest actually have families that are still alive. And one of the big challenges around that is that this is kind of a business-led model and for-profit. And so a lot of these residential care institutions are actually going into the communities, actively recruiting children to move into the quote-unquote orphanages. And then a lot of times some families are just in particularly dire situations and then opting to send their kids there. So in response to this issue, USAID invested in this new collective impact initiative called Family Care First Cambodia, where they brought together 30 plus implementing organizations, a backbone organization, to think about ways in which they could systematically try and address this issue and prevent unnecessary child-family separation. Oh no. Oh no, this has so many. Okay, I'm gonna keep clicking while I talk. So this is actually good because part of the point I wanna make is that we did a lie. So even though our name is Rapid Feedback MERL, there were many steps throughout the engagement in getting to the final point of feeling pretty confident about the intervention options that they could and should pursue for scale up or further implementation. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is actually dive into the different stages here. All right, so within the screening phase, as I mentioned before, this is really about trying to understand the overall theory of change, underlying assumptions, and then what activities would actually benefit from testing with our support. So when we joined the initiative, they had identified a series of activities that they wanted to pursue, different thematic subgroups in terms of the overall categories for how they wanted to address this issue, and then the different organizational and governance structure, but there was no theory of change in place. And so that was kind of our starting point for the entire initiative. Based off of that, especially recognizing that they wanted to do collective impact, we used this TOC to actually help them think through the logic model and the indicators that they would be tracking against. And then we started to think a little bit more about what are the specific activity areas that we saw as opportunities for experimentation and testing. And that co-creation TOC workshop was actually a bit of an opt-in process for us. It was really interesting because not only were we able to bring to the table our thoughts on where we saw key opportunities within the TOC for our involvement, but we also saw who was really excited within the group, who was asking kind of really interesting learning questions, and so I think it was a win-win overall. All right, so what did we actually do based on that? We ended up seeing, interestingly, within the theory of change that there was a lot of interest and focus on outcomes related to behavior change at the community level, so getting families to keep their children within the household whenever possible. 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. And then also for donors and volunteers who were either contributing money to the RCIs or volunteering their time. And these activities were completely missing from the theory of change. And so we pointed that out as a huge gap, and then we had many conversations with the implementing partners to figure out who was best placed to carry out some of these activities, who was interested in this, and we felt like this was a huge opportunity for us to provide some support. Development. So this is where we actually want to understand, all right, we're going to do some behavior change. What should the interventions actually look like? So we did a lit review on what existed within the evidence base, but then within that Cambodian context, we wanted to understand who we should be targeting, what messages would resonate, what communication challenges or channels or modes of delivery would be most effective. Wrong button. Okay, and so we did a lit review, formative research, and lean testing for all of these to try and basically suss out some of the responses to those learning questions that we had. And I think one of the things to point out is that wherever possible, we were identifying opportunities to actually have the implementers really lead that process. And so for the lean testing in particular, we developed the actual tools or the focus group protocol, the data collection template, but they were the ones that actually carried it out, and then we worked alongside them to think through the analysis and the implications for actual program design. Okay, so what did this result in? Based on the formative research we saw on the community side, that many of the community members knew that it was important to try and keep your family together, but there were many competing pressures around especially education services and access to those, and then financial pressures. Also, many of them were not aware of the harms of sending kids to an RCI. We also learned a little bit more about personal communication channel preferences and the potential role that the village chief could play in delivering some of the campaign messages. And so the recommendation there ended up being trying to focus on testing different messages that could be delivered by the village chief. On the donor side, this was especially interesting in kind of like my situation. We realized that many of the donors and volunteers did not realize that most of the kids were not actual orphans. And so in this case, we actually saw that the message was a little bit less important than just getting the word out. And so the main thing we wanted to look at was testing the channel of disseminating the message. Okay, so now we move into the feedback experiment. And here we had two different experiments, one on the community side, where the implementing partner ultimately decided that what they wanted to compare was their social work model to the social work model plus a behavior change campaign and seeing the effects of that. And then on the donor side, the implementing partner that we were working with had used social media platforms pretty exclusively for a lot of the behavior change campaign work that they had done in the past. So they wanted to better understand between Facebook and Google, which was more effective. So a lot of the questions that we asked were around changes in knowledge, attitude, and then cost effectiveness. And then on the donor side, we also explored questions that got a little bit more towards behavior around likelihood of donating to RCIs or volunteering. The experiment design on the community side was an RCT with qualitative data collection at endline using semi-structured interviews. And then on the donor side, we ended up posting the ads to Facebook and Google, administering a survey to participants before they were shown, one of 3 different versions of the ad, and then right after. So it was kind of immediate baseline inline data collection. And then after we ran the ads for about a month to look at cost effectiveness. Okay, what did we learn? There's a lot that we learned, and I think the thing I want to emphasize is that we built in these learning check opportunities, not just at the end of the experiment, but periodically throughout. On the community side, it was a bit more challenging because we did baseline and endline data collection, but even after baseline data collection, we sat down and we talked a lot about what we learned about targeting and the types of community respondents that were participating in these activities, and that helped them think about some of their social work related activities. What we saw was that a small percent of households were more likely to say that RCIs would result in psychological or emotional harms in children, and that was statistically significant, and also that there was an effect in the likelihood of sending a child to an RCI after the campaign. Through the qualitative research, we also saw a lot of opportunities to invest more in the village chiefs and community influencers. And then we also learned a ton about targeting. We figured out through the data which were the most vulnerable households to send, in terms of likelihood to send kids to RCIs. On the donor side, I'm going to go quickly because I have less than a minute. The ads were more effective on Facebook, but we learned a lot about the challenges with the targeting, and this was based on the targeting that the communications team had been pushing forward with all of the campaigns in the past. The sites the ads were getting posted on were like Breitbart, Baby Gaga, just like not at all what they had been wanting to target. And so that finding in and of itself completely changed how we thought about targeting, and that had implications for all of kind of the campaigns that they were pulling together. And then we had a lot of interesting findings about Facebook versus Google. Okay, there's a lot I can talk about in terms of lessons. Maybe you can ask some questions about it later. The number one thing that I want to harp on is we had closeout interviews with the implementers at the end of this to understand how the experience was overall for them. And the number one driver of success was having someone embedded in country. So we actually had a study coordinator who was a direct liaison between the implementing partners and then our teams that were based in the US. They actually sat in the offices of some of the implementing organizations. They would rotate throughout time. And so that far and away was the biggest contributing factor to building trust in the relationship, to having open communication channels, to building capacity for the implementers, and to think about just how to make this work, honestly. And we've had experiences where we haven't had that structure in place, and it's been incredibly challenging. Okay, I will stop.
everyone. So my name is Kanayo Omonoju, and I'm making a presentation on behalf of Center for Communication Programs Nigeria, formerly Center for Communication Programs Nigeria, but we are now called Center for Communication and Social Impact. I'll just give a brief of what we do before I dive into the case study I'll be making a presentation on today. So CCSI was formerly known as Center for Communication Programs Nigeria, and we are an indigenous Nigerian NGO, and we were birthed by the Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Programs in Baltimore. However, we actually have created a niche for ourselves around strategic communication in the country. So this morning I'll basically be speaking about one of our projects, which is something really dear to our hearts that we felt we could come up and talk to you about with respect to how we've used feedback to improve activities, and it's around our capacity building venture, and it's the Leadership in Strategic Communication workshop courses that we do. But as a matter of background, I'll just want to mention that across the number of projects that we carry out as an organization, something key that we look at as a matter of feedback is we are really very keen and interested to have feedback on everything we do. And we also have the mindset that timeliness in harvesting results is also something that we should really take cognizance of. So this is just a spread of a number of people that attended the 2016 workshop, and we have some of our facilitators on there. So for us as an organization, the Leadership in Communication workshop is one where we have a number of social and behavioral change communication practitioners come together, and we bring them in to sort of like build their capacity to have a better and increase their expertise around social and behavioral change to support the projection of better social and health development programs and activities that they all are involved in. So over time, we've improved our skill on feedback, but it's something that we are still improving on. And we look at feedback in a way where we make sure that it's something that we put in to the overall project goal. And just like I mentioned, the frequency and timeliness through which we get this is something that we also are very aware of. We explore a number of opportunities where we really think outside the box. We literally throw the box away and look at innovative ways where we can actually get the feedback from participants that attend these workshops and have us use whatever comes from their feedback to improve activities and improve a number of other things that we do on this program. And we have also learned that when we identify lessons from this people that attend the workshops, we make sure that in a timely manner we plow it back to see how we can improve on our activities within the workshop. So I already said the LSCW workshops is something that we as an organization have as a building, one of our building blocks around capacity building. And we actually have trained over 400 SBCC practitioners in Nigeria, and the list is also growing. So how do we listen to use feedback as an organization? We have seen that in the area of publicity and marketing, the workshop, because we know that if we have a crop of SBCC practitioners that are well grounded in the knowledge of what to do, the knowledge of theory and how to apply it within the different spaces of activities and projects that they carry out, then we would have a crop of individuals that would really take social and behavioral change communication to the next level. And we've also used feedback, what we hear, a number of people endorsing the programs, and we've used it to increase and better make our publicity and marketing strategies really come at a very high level. And what we hear from members of the group that attend over the years, we've actually been able to use the information they give us to better improve the curriculum and also see how we can better give them a good learning experience even as they come. And with that, we improve the learning approaches and the components of the training as we go on along the training curriculum. So as we learn and identify these different issues, while we find that a number of times, the periods where we have to get these feedbacks around the frequency, we do it during the workshops, we do it intermittently at a number of periods. We actually carry out things like pre and post tests where we're able to ascertain and assess their the amount of learning that has gone into the entire workshop. So for this particular one, it's a 2 weeks workshop, and you have over 20 adults stuck in a room for 2 weeks. And I'm sure you'll understand with me that it's an interesting kind of atmosphere that you would have. So we've been able to learn and listen to what participants are saying. What exactly are they saying about the workshop? What are they able to glean from the teachings and the learnings that they have been able to have as a result of attending? So when we hear what they have to give us, we're able to actually apply it and make changes for subsequent workshops that we are able to plan. For instance, we have people telling us, based on the feedbacks, we have evaluation forms that we hand out to them. And from these evaluations, we are able to get information like, oh, we'll suggest that you have better or have a change of a venue. And we've actually adopted some of their suggestions. And at the end of the day, we have that and we get that. Then from their employers and supervisors, what are they saying? So we actually are able to get their views on how these participants have been able to actually apply their learnings to the work that they do. And we get that feedback from their supervisors and even from their colleagues. And with that, it helps us to better improve what we do as an organization and what we do on the workshop planning. So with feedback, we've also been able to get information anonymously. We tend to find that when we do that, people are more open to bare their hearts and let us know areas that they think we should either improve or areas that they think we should change. And at such instances, we are very open. At the end of the day, I'll talk about what we as an organization do to actually take in these feedbacks. I would also go on to talk about how we interpret the feedbacks we get from the participants that attend a number of our workshops. So when we compare the knowledge and skills that they are able to show, probably from the pre and post tests that we conduct, we're able to ascertain, oh, this is the amount of learning that has gone into the entire period of exposure to the learnings that they acquired during the workshop. And with this, we can identify common trends. And with these trends, we try to improve on what we do. In spite of the fact that it is a capacity building venture, what we actually learn as an organization is something we also use on other activities and other projects that we have carried out over the years that we've been in operation. And we know that for us to get real evidence and for us to really get be able to improve, we actually have to have a listening ear. So we're not caught up with not being defensive as an organization, no, but rather because we know that the learning experience of these participants are things that we really need to take in. And so we listen to them, and it actually contributes a lot to the quality of discussions that go on at the end of the day. So from the pre and post tests that we conduct, we're able to align and find out some of the concepts some of our participants have been able to gain and what they've been able to glean. So from these, we're able to generate some amount of results by analyzing, either through extrapolating some bar charts. We are able to identify the level of learnings that individuals have been able to get from the trainings, and with this we know, oh, these are the concepts that they have gleaned and they have pulled out. Then what we do during the workshops is we sort of like set aside a number of people as leads that can cultivate and bring out a number of issues that members of the class might have, and these sort of come out as committees. And with these, we have them really identify what the problems or what the issues are, and we get feedbacks to the faculty on how to better take charge and have this solved for a better experience. So when we talk about reacting as an organization under this project, what we do is we have an active database where we can also pull out the lessons that are being learned, and we identify some emerging issues that we can actually learn from and see how we can take care of what is being said. And with that, we highlight a number of things. I was speaking with someone today, and I mentioned the fact that I know that numbers are important, but in as much as numbers are important, it's also important to know that whatever people are saying and whatever we are hearing from the people we are dealing with, we actually want to use that information for improvement rather than being judgmental, at the end of the day. So what we do is what we hear and what we listen to, we take it in and we react in the way where we try to improve on what we do. Oh, what did I do? Okay. In monitoring, we tend to ask a lot of questions. So we're listening at different levels. We're in the classroom, at the tables, we're having fun, we're having activities. We actually are listening to what participants are saying, and it goes a long way in really helping us improve and give participants a better learning experience. 5 minutes, okay. And we've also found out that while people are at the workshop, we get them to engage with their supervisors and with their colleagues, even back home. And with that, we get them to get in touch with them and let them know what exactly are the highlights. And this produces for us supervisors getting back to the faculty and eliciting some of the information that has been given them by the participants. And with that, it helps us as an organization to better know, oh, these are the areas we should really look into if we want to improve participants' learning experiences. And from the yearly trends that we've noticed and seen, with the engagements on social media, websites, and all that, we find that a number of people, with that we can actually monitor the number of people that have been part of our workshops and the quality of experience that they have also had, and this also helps us in what we do. So as a team, what have we done? We, as an organization, we are a learning organization. We are very open-minded. These are actually things that we've done to better improve what we do around the leadership workshop and around all other activities that we carry out. We really have to put ourselves in the shoes of the audience. We have an open mind, and we also have the ability to be flexible. We are also very adaptive. And one factor that I would love to mention is the fact that we try to be objectively honest. So if people have told us this is what we need to change, we actually put ourselves in their shoes and see how that change occurs. And over the periods of the workshops, we have come to see that people have come to a point where they actually let themselves go, and it becomes like a family. So for us, we have become adaptive, we've become flexible, and we've become open-minded. So these are some things I just want to mention, that these are things that individuals can really take in and apply to whatever projects we are carrying out. Be open-minded, be flexible, and be adaptive. You'll find that even as you work in the communities, these three factors will go a long way in being able to achieve a particular result. So I'll just take you through a journey, a 4-minute journey of the workshop last year, so you just have a feel of what it looked like from the beginning to the end. So I'll just ask Emma, if you can please just play that. It's a 4 minutes. I know my time is up. you. So that's just the journey through what we had last year. And I'll just leave you with one word. Let's just keep our minds open. And I'm sure we can actually achieve much more than we imagine. Thank you.
Well, meanwhile, I'll give a brief introduction. I'm Eddie Grant from the Praekelt Foundation. We're a South African nonprofit technology company. Perfect. No, that's fine. Okay. That's fine. We're a South African nonprofit technology company based in Johannesburg with an office in Cape Town. I'm Eddie Grant. I'm head of research, and I'm presenting really for a whole team of people, but especially co-lead of this project on feedback loops, Charles Copley, who's our head of data science. And one of the, so what we do is we deliver mobile health messaging. So mobile messaging across a number of different countries and platforms. But today I'm going to talk about the particular example of Mom Connect because it's a platform that's already gone to scale. And it started out, it was launched in 2014, and it started out as a simple SMS push messaging platform in South Africa. And I'm gonna, so I guess, starting point, sorry, I'm regrouping in my head now after the start. So in this presentation, I don't have quite the finished cycle that has been presented already. But I'm going to talk about work that we're doing on the Mom Connect platform, sort of flipping the idea that rapid feedback loops need to be at the early stages of intervention development, and instead starting with a program that's actually already at scale, and using that as a test bed, where our solutions and technologies that we develop on that program at scale, we then know work at scale. And then our aim is that we have the sort of platforms and designs and methodologies and frameworks so that as new services develop, these types of loops and this iterative approach can actually be baked in from the very beginning and are scalable as the project grows. And there are a lot of technology challenges as well as interdisciplinary conversational challenges as well as procedural challenges that we're ironing out and working out that need to sort of be in place to make that actually possible. So even simple things like what works in terms of your data pipeline when you're starting a program and have 200 people versus 200,000 versus 800,000 versus having personalized sequences of adaptive messages for each of those 800,000 people. So you have this mushrooming, and so we're sort of starting at this at scale level. We're very grateful to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for allowing us to do this work, because it's over and above the sort of basic delivery and development of the platform. So originally we're a software engineering company, and so this approach of sort of fail fast, fail quickly, learn, move on is sort of very much part of the ethos. So luckily that part is already in place, but then there have been a lot of other changes in terms of how to do this on the Mom Connect platform. So that's what I'm going to try to quickly talk about today. Just very briefly I know a lot of you have probably heard of Mom Connect and I don't want to bore you, but briefly for those who haven't, it's the South African National Department of Health's maternal mobile messaging platform, launched in 2014, originally just on SMS, now delivered through both SMS and WhatsApp. Mothers can choose in each of the 11 languages of South Africa. Recently, just 2 weeks ago, we hit the 2 million mark of 2 million women who've been registered on the platform. Women get registered when they show up at a public health facility and have a confirmed pregnancy. They get signed up on the platform. Over 95% of public health clinics in South Africa register women onto the program. So the active user population that we have as we do these feedback loops is around 800,000 at any one time. Mothers then receive stage-based messaging from, depending on their expected date of delivery, matched to that all the way through their pregnancy and through the first year of their child life. Now they can opt into an extra 4 years until the child is 5 on WhatsApp if they want. I just want to make sure I don't turn it off again. So one of the things that came out yesterday, and I just wanted to talk quickly about, is that within a program at this scale, there are actually feedback loops at different levels, and this was already alluded to. And so getting clarity on what level we're talking about, the issues and the design challenges and the functions are quite different at those different levels. So I just briefly wanted to skim through a very simplified version of some of the 3 basic levels at which we have been thinking about feedback loops on Mom Connect. So the first is the health systems level, and this was actually designed into the service right from the very beginning, and it's the program's health system strengthening function depends on this loop, and this is actually one of the fairly unique, I think, features of Mom Connect, probably not unique, but unusual for an SMS push messaging service, is that it closes this loop. So the health department has a mechanism for getting messages both to facilities and directly to mothers. And then the key thing is that the mothers then have a way of getting messages back to the health department. And by health department, I mean in South Africa, the National Health Department. So through the help desk, mothers can do a free reply to any text they receive, and through that mechanism, they can submit complaints and compliments about the services they received when they were in the facility, as well as asking health questions. And what that means is that the National Department of Health then have data on how the different facilities are performing. Not rigorous experimental data on performance, but they get feedback, essentially, and then they, in turn, can both feed that back to those individual facilities, because we have the mother's facility code, the compliments as well as the complaints, hopefully, but they can also, there's also a strengthened accountability that the facilities are being seen by the National Department of Health in some sense. I won't dwell on this loop, I'm just going to mention that that's there. And then at the micro, going from the most macro to the most micro level, Mom Connect was originally set up as a push messaging service, but obviously from a behavioral science perspective, we're really interested in adopting much more rapid feedback loops at the individual user level, so using feedback as a behavioral change strategy. I'm also not going to talk very much, or I'm going to loop back to this topic at the end of my talk, because it has implications for how we set up the intermediate level feedback loops, and sort of the technology that's developing now, especially through WhatsApp, opens up a lot of potential in this area. But historically, Mom Connect was a push messaging service, so this type of feedback to the mother didn't really occur except through the help desk in terms of question response, but not as a behavioral change strategy. So I'm going to talk about this middle level loop, which is, I think, although it hasn't been made explicit, sort of what we've been talking about so far, which is, and although the timing hasn't been specified exactly how rapid is, we've been thinking of rapid in the region of 6 weeks. But really, if we think in comparison to a clinical trial, then I guess anything under a couple years would be pretty rapid. And we're looking at this, and I'm repeating ideas here, but this idea of incremental improvement, small tweaks, small changes, and gathering sort of improvements over time. And like I said before, designing and creating these processes and systems in ways that are not going to be specific to Mom Connect, that can transfer across our digital platforms. So these are the elements of the loop. I also just, before I go deeper, I'm going to talk about each of those stages and how we approach it and the different types of evidence, the evidential pluralism. I really like that phrase. Oh, goodness. Okay, I'm going to really have to speed up. I just wanted to also mention that in addition to the levels, there's also different loops within time, over time frames, and that as we set up these rapid feedback loops, we really don't see it as this or RCTs. We have clinic level data, and we can start setting the groundwork for an RCT that we can then get information on our impact much later, and we can consider also the evaluation of this iterative approach as part of what we're doing. That eventually at some, on a longer time scale, we need these reality check time points where we connect the indicators we're using to clinical outcomes, because at the end of the day, we do care about those clinical outcomes, and our messaging programs do need to be having real world impact. I'm gonna just try to whiz through this, I'm really sorry. I think we use a similar approach to what has been discussed, theories of change, to map out areas, because once we have that map, we can iterate much more quickly to do the results to the innovation. So there's the beginning of the loop where there's like background work done. Okay, we're gonna do a loop focusing on, for example, infant feeding, or in our case right now, family planning. We're gonna do a little background information theory, figure out which behaviors we're trying to change, map that, and then we want these cycles to be running quite quickly. And we're going to use that to quickly think, okay, these results have answered this question, this gap, and now we're going to innovate. There are these other areas we want to test. And we use, Susan Mickey at UCL has developed a really useful behavior change taxonomy that is a list of behavior change strategies from across disciplines. We find that really helpful for figuring out which ones have we tested, which ones can we compare, which ones fit with our theory of change, move on. So that whole process, which can be extremely lengthy, is fairly quick. It's a very brief description. Come to me with questions after. The things we're trying to do with these loops is we're trying to be, sorry, I'm trying to turn and use the microphone to see, but we're trying to be fast, we're trying to be efficient. Instead of accuracy, I wish I'd actually put unbiased. We want to have unbiased measures of what our effects are, and we want to be sustainable. And then adaptation and tailoring I'll talk about. Hopefully I'll have time later. But for that reason, for example, for an unbiased measure, random assignment is very useful. Lucky for us, it's actually very easy to implement on our platform, so that's why we do that. In terms of efficiency, there's huge problem space to capture. There's so many different, even something as simple as text messages, there are a huge number of different things you can change. The persona, the tone, the structure, the length. On WhatsApp, the media use, groups, individuals, then there are the behavior change strategies. They're like 90 in the taxonomy. So that's a big problem space to explore. So efficiency is actually really important as we go through these cycles, even though we're trying to do many of them quickly. So we use a lot of factorial designs, and so we essentially have conceptualized it where we think on each cycle, we want to test a variation in terms of behavioral change strategy for a given topic. So in this case, say we're dealing with family planning. We're going to look at different behavioral change strategies, and then within the same experiment, we're also going to vary in terms of the content. So which aspect of family planning behavior, or what type of persona, what type of tone are we going to vary on this one? And then also the structure. So we want to get very nitty-gritty information since we do a lot of mobile messaging. What is the optimal message length? What is the optimal structure? How many full stops within a sentence? All of the structural, linguistic aspects of the messaging itself. So each experiment we do within a cycle, we vary these. By the way, the template, it might seem like very rigid, but it also speeds up the process. It allows us to, which I'll get to. I don't have time to actually talk about this. I think this is like a slower loop to design more data-driven interventions that allow for the adaptation and tailoring that I was talking about. So I welcome questions on these, and I'll just briefly say these are SMART trials, so they're to identify subpopulations and adaptive interventions that fit in, and we are embedding these within our loops to develop sort of service sets that are adaptive. And then this is a very new approach. The paper just came out in February, and we're excited to work with the author Yusuke Narita, who's an econometrician at Yale, and it's basically a very interesting experimental design that allows us to conditionally incorporate preferences, because in the real world, the individuals have preferences about which types of services and which types of approach they want to interact with. And if we can incorporate that while also getting unbiased treatment effect estimates, that's great. So we're seeing whether we can do that within our loops as well. Moving on. So one of the keys to the speed is not having any primary data collection. And also the introduction of WhatsApp. That has really expanded, because this is the thing I wanted to talk about, is that has expanded the flexibility and interest of what we can do within these rapid loops. SMS messaging has traditionally restricted the types of behavioral change strategies we can test and the type of messaging we can test on these platforms. WhatsApp has totally changed this, and also given us many more, thank you, many more outcome measures. And so we can look at many more indicators of response. And one of the first challenges for us in doing mobile messaging is just uptake. If the mothers are not reading the messages, all of our fancy behavioral change strategies and wording and content length and whatnot really obviously is not making much difference. And with SMS, we had no way of really knowing. Whereas with WhatsApp, we have that automated data in the system, so we can now see whether messages are downloaded. We can start experimenting, what image size is downloaded, what is the tolerance there, what is the interest in voice messaging versus visual, etc. So this is really exciting. More and more mothers, so we see a very linear trend of more and more mothers in South Africa choosing to sign up on WhatsApp. Smartphone penetration is increasing. There's a move and a sort of commitment from the Department of Health to try to move entirely over to WhatsApp. That may not be achievable within 5 years, but we definitely expect a large expansion in WhatsApp. Most people in South Africa have access to WhatsApp, but not necessarily at this point on their own phones. So at the moment, the work we're doing on WhatsApp is not necessarily with the entire population. So this is the kind of interest that this offers within these loops, is that we can now have all of these sort of outcomes or indicators of response and engagement with SMS messaging, as well as complexity in terms of the behavioral change strategies that we're using. So for example, contact sharing allows us to look at how do we get actual message sharing or recruitment, peer recruitment onto different services. So not necessarily directly relevant to maternal health messaging, but it becomes a platform for other types of health messaging and looking at peer effects. And similarly, the ability to, instead of just sending messages directly to an individual, we can create a group for each of those individuals, and then they can invite their own personal support networks into those groups. We then get social network information about who is in their personal network. We can reach their personal network directly with our messages, understand interactions there. The complexity and richness of what we can do, and then also the measures of what mothers are getting out of the service have increased significantly from the introduction of WhatsApp, and all of the different sort of capabilities that have come out of the API integration we've been working on. Another thing is that we can ask for GPS coordinates to be shared, so that's important in terms of getting better indicators of clinical outcomes like clinic attendance and so on. So briefly on the actual structure and implementation of the loop, so this idea of like fixed experimental designs, like that 2x2x2 factorial within the rapid loops, has allowed for a lot of automation within the analysis and reporting process. So we can easily reuse our code. We can vary the power parameters depending on the effect size we expect. So we can fiddle with, our sampling inclusion criteria and the actual number allocated to different trial arms. But then we just have conditionality set within our code so that that whole process can happen fairly quickly, and we can have real-time data visualization through that whole cycle. And then I think the writing up always requires human input, and I would say is what slows it down. We need to actually interpret and translate that, because then the translation into the innovation, even with the theory of change maps and the BCTs, is still a slow process and an interdisciplinary process. Conversations with service designers as well as with users. So here I just want to mention that we, again, don't see it as experiments versus other methods, and we include user voices in as many different ways really as we can in a cost-effective and sustainable way. One of the ways, so again, using WhatsApp, we've been able to start exploring digital focus group discussions with random samples of individuals from our user group who then can review messaging and messaging strategies, give us their views on what's working, as well as actually the research methodologies themselves. Like, do our consent procedures make sense? Are we explaining what the research we're doing well is? Do they understand it? How do the translations work in the different 11 languages, and so on and so forth? One of the ones that actually we just tried out, and I just wanted to bring it up because I just haven't seen it much, but it seems like sort of an obvious thing to do now that we've done it, is we actually hired this young woman as sort of just an inclusivity initiative as part of the team, just thinking it would be really great to have someone who is recruited from the hardest to reach portions of our target population to just be part of the team as an intern so that she can learn, but we also benefit from her views. And that has been valuable way beyond our expectations. And in terms of talking about rapid feedback, I liked that idea of pointers. This is not RCT information, but it's like an instant sense check, because she's at every meeting looking at all the content, looking at everything and saying, this doesn't make sense, and what are you thinking? And as the only foreigner in the team, of course, I'm like the furthest out of it and everything. So for me, it's like a good counterbalance to me coming from so far away. But anyway, I would strongly recommend it because it's just been incredibly valuable. And yeah, we basically try to find any evidence that we can get, any feedback that we can get from any source, we're going to incorporate. And at the moment, our main aim is just finding ways of making those pipelines sustainable. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in the afternoon session about the technologies and the actual tools, and we try to use open source software as much as possible. It does, I was supposed to talk about challenges and lessons in 1 minute, which I will. So one of the challenges is that this kind of work draws from so many different disciplines and cutting across so many different ways of working. So qualitative research, quantitative research, as we're starting to, for example, implement the exam assignment algorithms on our systems, there are a lot of, this stuff gets complicated. Econometricians speaking to astrophysicists, speaking to software engineers, with the service designers and the behavioral scientists saying, well, actually, that, the preference elicitation should maybe work like this and this and this. It gets super complicated, and so there's been a lot of work on figuring out, where those different areas of work fit, where we need external expertise, where we need to build our internal expertise, which is in and of itself a slow process, and I would say that's a major challenge, but also definitely doable, I think. So for us, for example, we decided we don't try to do subject matter expertise ourselves. So we're not going to try to develop ourselves as family planning experts. We're going to partner with academics who are family planning experts, and we rely on them for that. And then, I think the technology and the stakeholders is the other challenge. We can't rapidly change, for example, our theory of change for Mom Connect, because all of the different stakeholders on Mom Connect would not be cool with that. Anyway, lots of other challenges. Feel free to get in touch with me if you have questions.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our speakers.